Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I also appreciate everybody coming out and just start from really the beginning place, which is we are, I think, all taking collective responsibility. One of the things we can agree on is the fact that everybody would come out. We actually share a concern, and we share activism, commitment, and belief in Oakland. And folks want to come together to make it better. And I think the important part is that we have some disagreements about some things, but we're actually here to engage. And the last meeting, there were some more details about progress, and just a reminder for some folks, we did pass in June a strategic plan which fundamentally alters the course, the content of the Oakland Unified School District. Spent about 2 years engaged in not only conversation but community process, task force meetings, literally more than 5,000 people engaging in that conversation over those couple of years to produce that strategic plan that the board approved unanimously. And now, year one of implementation, but it's really year 3 for me, and many, many more years for many more of you in this work. But I would just say, in that time, and Jonathan shared a few things, I don't want to go too fast over some pretty remarkable things. So the district was taken away from Oakland for fiscal mismanagement, right? So we lost local control, and now we have it back. And 3 years later, when we received the district back, right, there was a $40 million structural deficit. So the whole $100 million loan was taken, and give it back to you, but the expenses exceed revenue by $40 million. So a lot of folks have been upset about some of the decisions the board has made, but I will tell you what, being able to send 0 statutory layoff notices for fear of budget because we didn't know where the floor was and we wouldn't be able to manage our finances, that's a very different reality than almost every other district in the state. And I know the closures, the reductions in staff, a lot of the hard decisions that have been made have been difficult, and folks have been on different sides of that. But to be able to stand together to go forward, to make decisions about how to have a healthy district and engage these conversations about trade-offs and investment in staff and in kids, we're structurally balanced, and we still have to pay $6 million of our revenue that our kids and staff deserve is paid to pay off the loan. That's money we don't even get. It doesn't even come to us from the state. It's taken before it even comes. But we have balanced our budget given that reduction. So that's one thing we do need to organize about together. That loan needs to go away. But for us right now, we're in a position where we are able to engage some pretty different kind of thinking. The board passed a theory of action. So it's one thing to have a strategic plan, but then what's going to guide the decision making of the board? So the board approved a theory of action that is among the most radical theories any district in California is holding. That in fact we could invent the Central Public School Organization as a hub, as an organizer for all education activity in the city, and be in relationship with what they call diverse providers. So the idea is to be in partnership with the private schools, work deeply with charters, and in fact, the evidence in the 2 partnership schools that we just have now an MOU with, Memorandum of Understanding. So those schools decided that they wanted to do some things different. Their teachers voted, but they didn't leave the district. So now we have a partnership where essentially they've stayed close. They're going to share PD. Our student assignment is still going to help them. It's basically saying we need to create high-quality public schools in every neighborhood for every child, regardless, public, private, charter. We need a vision of healthy kids, and we need to do that across the city. So we've actually engaged in some pretty different kind of work, and now some existing charters in Oakland have said, hey, we want to do that too. Some in-district public schools say we want to do that too, which is essentially to create the conditions that would really meet the needs of kids. And what I've been impressed by is that I feel like for the first time in a long time, we're actually talking about student-centered things. And that is actually what is going to get us where we need to go, I think. Many of you know a history of activism in Oakland. I would say a lot of what happened during state administration was there were a lot of adult-centered decisions that were literally indefensible, that cost us now a lot of money. We're being charged, for example, by the state controller, fines that happened during state administration for decisions made during state administration. We're being fined now to pay back for that. So there are things that we're still recovering from, but now that we have local control, that we can work together and make these decisions together, I think we're actually going to see a way through some of this. The activity of these partnership schools, folks, changes the conversation entirely. And when we start talking about what do our kids need, it's important to go back to the idea of really where are we? We're at 55% graduation right now in our high schools. 55%. So almost a 50-50 chance if you go to high school in Oakland that you're actually going to graduate. And that doesn't mean you transferred somewhere else. That means you don't finish. Right? So how many think that's good enough? Right. It's not. It's absolutely not. And so what we engaged is a very different conversation now about what is actually the outcome that we're looking for. It's not just about kids graduating, right? We got to do that. But we're also sitting in a context where in East and West Oakland, our African American Latino young men, the unemployment rate is between 35 and 50% for 18 to 24-year-olds. So we have to be paying much more attention to what our kids are going to do after high school. And I would just say, we need all of our kids to be career ready, right? If you go to college, it's for a career, right? You don't go to college to keep going to college. We need them to be ready to go to college, every single one of them. Because increasingly, the career workforce, and there are some credentials where with an AA and a credential, you're earning more than a 4-year BA, but that's with 2 more years, and that's with credentials and certificates. We need all of our kids ready to do that. The purpose of going to school isn't just to go to more school, it's to have a paying career. And so the linked learning work that we're doing across the district, we've got 25 existing pathways. Oakland has a long history of some of the most extraordinary work in the country, quite frankly. Some of the pathways at Tech have been great, but now we're moving district-wide with the linked learning work, and we are one of 9 districts in California that have been funded by the Irvine Foundation, working with ConnectEd, about really deepening this connection between what kids should know, but what they should also be able to do. And increasingly in the world, it's not just about your career, it's about a portfolio of skills that you're going to use as you make choices about where you go and what work you do. The world of work is changing, and we need to be prepared to support kids. And I would argue that some of what we hold as the expectation around high school is getting in our way. So we've got to really rethink high school across the board, and the opportunity to really extend the year in 3 of our high schools, McClymonds, Fremont, and Castlemont, to go to a 204-day work year to support those kids, to actually also support staff, to have more time to learn and do work together. That's part of this. In a large framework, we're trying to change the whole district. We have a universal change strategy. Community schools, thriving students, trying to engage a lot more across the board, upgrade the kind of support for our schools. We also have a very targeted approach. It's this notion of targeted universalism. So some people have asked me also, why are you talking about African American boys all the time? Because those boys are doing least well in the most categories, and they're least represented in the most positive categories. So we, in my mind, must pay attention while we're doing all this work to the kids who need the most. And as we get better at the whole thing, because I think if we didn't pay special attention to the kids who were most outside of the sphere of success, that we may raise the whole thing, but we wouldn't close the gap. So we're taking on this approach, even in these high schools, we're saying, and specifically, what do African American boys need? And I think increasingly we're finding connections across the city. People are stepping up. When you name something and you're explicit about it, I think you can actually do something different to support and change the outcomes. So the big frame here, and people have asked, like, what's this community schools, thriving students, why do you call it this? because I honestly believe our teachers do extraordinary work. And it's just not possible to meet all the needs that our kids bring to our schools every day, unless we organize all the political systems, public systems, philanthropy. If we do the right things and create protected pathways for our kids and provide the support services necessary for all kids, I think then kids can take advantage of what's going on in the classroom. So we are now, folks may or may not know this, we have 15 full-service functioning clinics in the middle and high schools that are now, we have Medicaid reimbursement strategy, so they're not going to go away. It's actually harder to start, but then it's a durable funding structure. So we're making choices right now about putting things in place that kind of from a fiscally conservative, socially progressive stand, that there's going to be a dedicated, durable funding stream for all these choices we're making. And I tell you what, it is long haul work, and yet we're starting to see, just from the African American male perspective, increased attendance, fewer suspensions. We're seeing things as a result of this work that are making a difference. We're seeing practices like restorative justice, positive behavioral intervention, things that actually we're going to take a different stand and engage differently. It's having different kinds of results. So we're holding on to more kids, but I tell you what, we still got a situation where I sit with young people and they tell me, man, I am hearing that it's a lot better for me if I stay out of school. I take more heat for going to school than I do for staying out of school. You know, if I come to, and many of you have heard me say this, I said it the other day in forum, like there are kids, I was in the fishbowl with a group of 15 kids, they're talking about what bus they can take, what bus they can't take, navigating a city where they feel like they're in jeopardy all the time. So we have a much bigger issue about a healthy city, not just a better school district. And quite frankly, folks, educators have been beat up, pounded on, the failure of K-12. I tell you, we sit in a much bigger system that has issues of generational poverty, structured racialization, certain sections of the city where certain people live and have been placed, and opportunities have been stripped. So unless we actually reimagine this whole organization, this school district, as building up different kind of opportunities across the whole city, we won't see a different set of outcomes. Now, we talked on, well, Jonathan talked at the beginning about collective responsibility. I really started by appreciating the folks who are out here, because if we don't do something together, we're set up perfect. The way we've all been behaving has produced the outcomes we've got. The way we've all been behaving has produced the outcomes we've got. So unless we're going to make some different choices and make some hard choices and stand together and interrupt and break some bad habits, then I guarantee that everybody in this room is going to be fine. But we will see a reproduction of the pattern that we've got right now. And that pattern looks mostly like young men of color outside of the sphere of success, having not only fewer job opportunities, but navigating a city where they're in danger. And I don't want to live in that city. But I think we have a chance with our schools, with each other, to create very different kinds of conditions. And quite frankly, the fiscal piece, like why do I talk about, one of the things I'm satisfied about is that we've actually eliminated a structural deficit. Because now we can actually make some decisions and trade-offs and decide what it is we really want to fund together, and what it is we need to invest in, and how we're going to stand in this together, and how we're going to take shared responsibility, quite frankly. Because I tell you what, part of the way this place has been, I've lived in Oakland for 15 years. People want to holler about all the issues out here, and all the structural stuff, and why don't you do this, and why don't you do this? We spend very little time talking about the very specific things that our children need. We spend very little time talking about the quality of instruction. We spend very little time talking about how we're going to increase the number of adults who are with and around our children. We spend very little time talking about the things that our kids need to go to and come home from school safely. That's where we got to get. And And so for me, this first 3 years has been really about making a coherent, stable system so we can pay deep attention to things that really matter. And just really fundamentally, I'm not a person who spends a lot of time, so some of you have known me for a long time. I'm just not a person who spends a lot of time lamenting the things that I can't do because of what I don't have. I literally say we must do everything we can with what we've got. And that's been my theory of action since I've been here. We haven't done anything that we can't afford. We haven't done anything that we can't abide by legally. We're going to do everything that's within the law and we can afford to make it better while we get closer to doing kind of bigger, grander things like changing the whole system. But I feel like the narrative in Oakland, people are so used to what's not working, what's wrong, let's fight, rather than talking about, hey, we got some things to share, we got places of success, we got things to build on. And unless we actually make a decision to shift that narrative, to talk about a healthy Oakland, to take personal responsibility for checking our own skepticism, when I'm feeling like it's not working, do I say, there we go again? Do I ascribe old meanings to new problems? Or do I step up? And I think, quite frankly, that this is a time to decide, are you going to step up, or what are we fighting for? And clarifying that about being about a healthy Oakland and about better relationships with each other. I feel like for me, the journey we've traveled in 3 years of local control, this school board deserves a hell of a lot of credit for hard decisions and leadership back to a place that this city has not been at this place with a structurally balanced budget in a very long time. So you can make informed, thoughtful decisions. So we're at a moment where now it's about our adult choices, about the stories we want to tell, and about how we want to work. So I just really appreciate folks coming out. Looking forward to the conversation about questions and continuing going on. Thank you very much.